Hello, dear community members. This is my first tank mechanic simulator video since the game got released the 20th of February 2020. Tank Mechanic Simulator is a game about World War II tanks, their crews and their contribution in military history. As a tank museum owner, your task is to recover destroyed or abandoned tanks and renovate them. In this video I'm going to show you the restoration of a German Panther from start till finish. I found this tank wreck in the back of my yard. All tank wrecks you can find there mostly miss a lot of parts. That is not different with this one. As you can see, I will have to craft a lot of parts. Let's have a look at what is all missing on this tank and write it down. Writing it down will make it easier later on in the game when I will craft most of the missing parts. Using the radial menu, you can enter the tank analysis window. That window gives you all the information about the tank's parts. You can clearly recognize the missing parts, because they are grayed out. For the parts that are still available, you can see by the percentage, how much that part has been damaged. I am going to write down all the missing parts on a piece of paper. That will later help me out defining which parts I need to order, or craft at my crafting bench. But I'll show you that later in this video. I've already requested the developers to add some sort of shopping list. I'm talking about a new feature, which would let us click the missing parts in the tank analysis window to add them on a list. That list could then be used in the store, or at the crafting bench. There is a similar feature in the game Car Mechanic Simulator 2018. When you're in the shop, you can pop up the shopping list, which reminds you of which parts you need to order. It would be nice to have the exact same feature in Tank Mechanic Simulator. But then not only for this store, but also for the crafting bench. The first task we have at hand now, is disassembling the tank. I need to get rid of all the removable parts, before I can do anything with them, or the tank's hull, turret, and engine. Those who already know the game, will say that you don't have to do this step in order to renovate the tank. They will say that it could be done way faster, by leaving all the parts on the tank, and do the removal of rust, sanding, primering, and painting just like that. I have to admit that they are right. But if you want to learn how tanks are put together, I would suggest a handle like I do. On top of that, if you do it like this, it will feel more real. While you're disassembling the tank, you are also learning about the different parts that vehicle contains, and the location they are mounted. Try to remember those parts' names and locations. It will help you later with putting the tank back together. Some names could have been chosen more accurate, but that is where the community comes in. You can always suggest changes through the official Discord or Steam forum, for which the links are put in the description of this video. Of course, real tanks are way more sophisticated, and exist out of more parts than used here in the game. The thing is, it would be too difficult to implement every single piece used in real life. The game would be simply too big and heavy. Anyways, the way the tanks are built in the game, is giving you a nice overview or inside look, about how tanks are built. By using the radial menu, you can remove the turret and engine, and put them in the foreseen stands in your workshop. Removing the turret and engine makes it easier to do stuff on each part in particular, but also on the rest of the tank. Now you can enter the hull, to see what else needs to be done on the inside. By using the radial menu once again, you can crawl into the tank. You have the ability to put yourself at any crew member's position in the tank. That makes it easier to look around, and find parts that still need to be disassembled. By changing to the tank commander's position, you will find yourself inside the turret, even when it is already put on the turret stand. The same way as in the hull, you can now easily disassemble all the parts in the turret. Of course, you can also switch to the gunner's or loader's position in the tank, to find yourself in the turret. The same goes for the driver's or radio operator's position to find yourself in the hull. Now it's time to disassemble the engine. As you can see, the engine is built in a pretty much simplified way, but the developers already promised us to add more details to them. Did you know that the Panther had a V12 petrol Maybach HL230 P30 engine? That engine was good for a 690 horsepower, and made the tank go as fast as 55 km per hour for the first models, and 46 km per hour for the later models. The Maybach HL230 engine was also used for the Jet Panther, Tiger II, Jag Tiger, and later versions of the Tiger I, and Storm Tiger. And now we arrived at the part in which we are going to repair stuff. First of all, I'm going to have a look at the storage. You'll find all the disassembled parts there. I select all disassembled parts and outsource them for repair. At this point you can choose what has to be done with the parts. You can ask for the parts to be repaired in only a sanded, primered, or painted stage. Depending on what you choose, the price will go up or down. In this case I choose for the parts to be fully repaired. That means that all parts will be taken care of completely. The only thing I will have to do is putting them back at the tank. As you can see, all parts are getting repaired. Even those who were originally marked as only replaceable. Now it's time to use the crafting bench. In order to be able to use the bench, you will have to buy the tank blueprints. Those are rather expensive, so you will have to earn a lot of money before you can do this step. If you don't have this possibility yet, you can buy all missing parts from within the tank analysis window. All elements require a certain amount of crafting parts. The amount depends on how big the element is. You can earn crafting materials by deconstructing old parts in your storage, or you can go outside, to your yard, and take crafting parts from the scrap metal piles. In the crafting bench window, you simply select the needed pieces. Clicking with the left mouse button will add an extra piece, while clicking with the right mouse button will decrease the wanted amount of that particular piece. When all pieces are chosen, you can click on the button Craft Elements. You will have to repeat this step for every category, unless you select all wanted parts in the first category or tab in the crafting panel. My work is done here at the crafting bench. It is now time to work on the empty hull and turret. The first thing I'm going to do is getting rid of all the rust. I can simply take the right tool from my tool belt by scrolling my mouse wheel. If you don't have the tool belt yet, you'll have to take the right tool from the tool table. The tool belt can be obtained by upgrading the top row completely in the upgrade panel. I have to get rid of the rust on the hull, but also the turret and engine needs to be taken care of. After getting rid of all the rust, it is time to sandblast everything. Sandblasting is also known as abrasive blasting, which is a generic term for the process of smoothing, shaping and cleaning a hard surface by forcing solid particles across that surface at high speeds. The effect is similar to that of using sandpaper, but provides a more even finish, with no problems at corners or crannies. Sandblasting can occur naturally, usually as a result of particles blown by wind causing aeolian erosion, or artificially, using compressed air. When everything is sandblasted, it is time to put the hull and turret in a primer coat. A primer or undercoat is a preparatory coating put on materials before painting. Priming ensures better adhesion of paint to the surface, increases paint durability, and provides additional protection for the material being painted. To put everything in a primer coat, you'll have to choose the right tool for it. It is basically the paint gun, which you can put in a different stand by pressing the X button. The primer coat is the red-orange layer you put on the surface of your piece. By pressing the X button again, you change the paint gun to actual paint. The color is automatically chosen for you. Now you can paint the turret and hull. Now it's time to put the tank back together. By using the radial menu, you are able to go into assembly mode. The system helps you to put the correct parts in the correct places, by showing the parts in a transparent state. The only thing you have to do now, is clicking the right mouse button on a transparent piece to get it mounted back on the tank. While I'm mounting all the parts back to the tank, I'm going to give you some information about the real Panther. Call it a history lesson. Though, initially, mechanically unreliable at her inception, the Panther medium tank of the German army went on to become one of the finest battle tanks in all of World War II. She brought together the perfect blend of mobility, firepower and armor protection. In some circles, the Panther is considered the best tank of the war, surpassing the overall capabilities of even the war-winning Soviet T-34 tank, whose appearance on the battlefield directly affected the development of the Panther herself. The Panther's main gun was proven very worthy, and could engage enemy targets at distances outside of the range of her enemies. However, several major blemishes kept the Panther from becoming the war-winning design Hitler ultimately envisioned. Her mechanical reliability, at least early on, was suspect of some major issues, which were never fully ironed out throughout her fighting career. While her frontal armor was excellent, her side armor was no thicker than 2 inches. Her crew rode and fought in a cramped space when compared to her contemporaries, and she needed to come to a complete stop to fire her gun. Range was limited when traversing off-road, and the engine service life was inherently short. Her overlapping road wheels wreaked havoc for Panther crews in the mud and snow of the Soviet winter. Regardless, the Panther excelled as a fighting unit and was produced up until the war's end. She was, in fact, the best overall tank that Germany could field in any quantity, with 2 Panthers produced for every single Tiger tank completed. In an ironic twist, the Panther was inducted into the French army during the post-war years, as France looked to rebuild her military might. Prior to mid-1941, the German army was a seemingly unstoppable foe. While the air power of the German Luftwaffe was shut out from invading the British mainland during the summer of 1940, which was the Battle of Britain, the German divisions made their mark throughout Western Europe, culminating in the conquering of hated neighbor France. The coordinated attacks of infantry, armor and aircraft, German blitzkrieg took every opponent by surprise, and, despite valiant efforts on the part of most defenders, Europe was now under the domain of Adolf Hitler and his Third Reich. One of the keys to this early success lay in the tactical use of German tanks, or panzers, that spearheaded every ground advance. These began with the machine gun-wielding Panzer I light tank series, and evolved into the cannon-armed Panzer II light tank. The next logical step became the development of the medium-class tank-killing Panzer III, and the fire support escort Panzer IV, the latter developed specifically to benefit the 1, 2 and 3 series in a given offensive. Both of these latter systems graduated to become much more than their intended roles, with the Panzer IV even more so. Progressive installations of ever more powerful main guns and armor kits made the Panzer IV a truly lethal opponent for a time. Couple the technology with disciplined, well-trained crews, and nothing, it seems, could stop the German onslaught. The fate of Hitler's Third Reich was sealed in June of 1941, when he enacted Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Up to this point, the Germans and Soviets were loose allies, having signed the Economic Military German-Soviet Pact, Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, of 10-year non-aggression against one another, and each went about his own business in conquering weaker neighbors, ultimately dividing Poland in two. The Soviets also committed to war with Finland, and occupied Baltic states and Romanian provinces. Meanwhile, with France conquered, Germany secured alliances with Hungary, Romania and Slovakia before beginning its plan to take on the Soviet Union. The official German directive was signed by Hitler on December 18, 1940. Barbarossa opened the playing field substantially and now involved large swathes of Soviet-held territory. A confident German army steamrolled through a lot of territory in the early days, while the Red Army tried valiantly to stem the tide. In July of 1941, German troops ran across a new Soviet tank, the T-34 medium tank, and were relatively successful against them, for they outnumbered the new type. However, all was not lost to the Germans on the significance of this new weapon system, and word began spreading through various ranks about the new Soviet tank that outclassed existing German mounts. In October of 1941, the Russians played their card by unveiling their T-34s in numbers, backed by heavy KV-1 tanks. This time, the Red Army showcased their T-34s through excellent mobility, thanks to the use of large road wheels, a wide track base, suitable for the Soviet terrain, slope-thick armor to combat incoming enemy projectiles, and a capable 76.2mm main gun. The 26-ton system was crewed by 4 personnel, and came complete with a pair of machine guns for self-defense. Like any tank, she was fitted to fire both high-explosive and armor-piercing rounds. These T-34s successfully took on elements of the 4th Panzer Division, and came as a nasty shock to the invading Germans. Their heavy frontal armor saw enemy shells literally bouncing off glassy plates, to the horror of German tankers, and the 76.2mm main gun penetrated, with ease, through the armor of attacking Panzer IIIs and IVs. The T-34 had arrived, and sent a statement that reverberated back to Berlin. German authorities sent word to their armaments industry, and meetings convened to deliberate the future of German armor, if success for the Reich were to continue. While the arms industry had been toying with heavier medium tank designs for some time, the unfolding situation along the East Front rapidly adjusted the requirement. A solution against the T-34 was sought, for the Soviet tank began to elicit much fear with German tanker crews who were more or less ill-equipped to counter the new enemy, a position they had not felt for years up to now. Hitler stepped in and ordered engineers to begin design of a counter-tank to shore up the existing stable of panzers. Evaluations of T-34s in November of 1941 were made possible only after the capture of several intact specimens, and their true engineering genius finally shone through. Even German engineers could not help but pay their respects to the forward-thinking Soviets. Despite only 2 vehicles being delivered for evaluations in late 1942, German army authorities were quick to request the tank be placed into serial production for November of 1942, and deliver 250 examples by May of 1943. However, the design was not fully tested under combat environments and applicable stresses. Mechanical failures were even prevalent during some of these initial tests. But these did not stem the German army need to field the new, promising tank along the front lines in the quickest amount of time possible. As such, mine commenced with series production, and was joined in the effort by rival Daimler-Benz, Maschinenfabrik Niedersachsen Hanover, or MNH for short, and Henschel. Once production ramped up, some final changes to the original design were enacted. Armor was beefed up to range 60mm to 80mm in thickness, though this worked directly to increase operating weights upwards to 43 tons. Considering the original design was intended to be fielded closer to the 30 to 35-ton range, and thusly all mechanical components were stressed to that weight limit, the 43-ton operating weight surpassed all design specifications concerning the power pack and drivetrain. A move to increase armor protection even further had to be shelved because of the critical weight gain already inherited by the base design. By the time of May 1943, German factories had fallen short of the lofty 250 example delivery mark. Instead, only 200 Panthers were available in time for Operation Citadel. On the contrary, the Soviet T-34 series, proving easier and cheaper to build, would be available in hundreds more to outmatch the German Army Tank 4 tank. Panthers were shipped to the front by any means possible, which included rail cars. In contrast, the equally new and formidable Heavy Tiger series proved too large for travel by rail. It was ultimately envisioned that a full battalion of Panther tanks would staff a single Panzer division, and some 600 Panthers were optimistically expected to be rolling out of factories to appease Army requirements. However, 330 Panther tanks would become the peak monthly output during the rest of the war. The initial Panther Ausf models received an underwhelming start to her, now respected, combat carrier. In her earliest of forms, these at the Battle of Kursk, she fell not so much to enemy shells and anti-tank guns, but to mechanical failures of the gearbox and running gear. Confusingly, the Ausf model was then followed on the production lines by the Ausf. Production began at MNH, Daimler-Benz, Demag, and MAN facilities in August-September of 1943, and more or less maintained the qualities and features of her forerunner. The Ausf was given a new turret, yet utilized the same chassis as the Ausf. The turret of the Ausf introduced an all-new cupola for the commander's position, which was now of cast armor fitted, and with 7 periscopes for viewing outside regions of the vehicle. This made the Ausf slightly taller than the Ausf. Additionally, the position could mount an 7.92mm MG-34 machine gun for anti-aircraft defense. The radio operator's periscope was removed, and a sighting device was added directly to his bow-mounted machine gun. The letterbox opening of the bow machine gun was deleted, and replaced with a wall mount. The turret pistol ports used for point defense against infantry assaults were replaced by an integrated grenade launcher, meant to keep enemy infantry at bay. At the end of the Ausf production run in May of 1944, a further 2,192 Panthers had been produced. Allies in the West first came across Panther tanks in Normandy in 1944, following the massive D-Day amphibious landings in June. Panthers proved stout defenders, as their front armor was nearly impenetrable to the weapons of British, Canadian and American troops. Conversely, the 75mm main gun of the Panther could relatively easily engage the formations of Shermans coming their way. It was such that as many as 4 Shermans could be called upon to tackle a single Panther, 2 to draw its fire, and a pair to engage the Panther along its 2-inch armored sides. Rear shots at the engine compartment were something of a rarity, but highly effective if achieved. After Allied successes across most of northern France, the Panther fell into the assaults making up the Battle of the Bulge in the Ardennes Forest, essentially Hitler's last gasp in the West. During this battle, and to provide the Americans with further confusion, some Panthers were disguised to resemble Allied M10 tank destroyers. Seeing the value of the Panther, especially once its many mechanical issues were rectified, the system was heralded as the lead battle tank of the Third Reich in early 1944. She was to spearhead any new offensives against the enemy, and utilize her stellar qualities against a lesser foe. This meant that the target production goal was to provide the German army with up to 400 Panther tanks, a month to be churned out of German factories. However, the Allied bombing campaign, coupled with advances by army forces on the ground, led to a shortage of supplies, and captured assembly lines. As Germany fell further and further into ruin, more and more Panther-producing factories fell under Allied control in turn. The MNH facility at Hanover was one such local, and the British assumed control and forced the production of a few extra examples for evaluation back on the British mainland. Similarly, the Panther ended up on American test fields at Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland. To the British and the Americans, the Panther was known simply as the Mark V. The end of the Panther's reign effectively ended with Hitler's suicide, the Soviet capture of Berlin, and the surrender of the German army, the latter in May of 1945. It's time to focus on the engine. Assembling the engine happens in the same way as everything else. You just put all the pieces back on their places. When the engine is done, you can put it back in the tank by using the radial menu again. And of course, we cannot forget about the turret. First I put the turret back together at the turret stand. When it's done, I bring the turret back together with the tank's hull. Now that we've done that, we can finish the tank. At the end of the assemblation, I always check the bottom of the tank, just to be sure that I didn't forget anything. And then, last but not least, I check the tank's analysis panel once again, to be sure everything is done, and nothing got forgotten. Of course the tank is now only put in an original base color. If you want to put a certain camouflage to it and maybe some decals, then you need to bring the tank to the paint room. In there you can do whatever you want with the tank. When that is all done, it is time to test the tank out. You have to use the radial menu again, and choose the test drive option. Before you can actually start the engine, you have to add the necessary fluids to it. First you look for the fuel. Then the oil. Followed by the cooling fluids. When all that is done, you can crank up the engine. The moment you see that the engine is running smooth, you can take the tank out for a spin. You have a complete test course lying behind the workshop. You can test speed, gears, torque, traction, and have a little bit of fun with the tank. You can choose whatever position in the tank you want, but I like to take the driver's position. By using the C button you can change the camera view from inside the tank to outside, and the other way around. You can check if the lights are working, by pressing the L button. And we're off. The blue rays show you where you have to go. Just follow them and take every obstacle on your way. And now, again, some facts. The Panther's crew consisted out of 5 members. A driver, a gunner, a loader, a radio operator and the tank commander. The nations which made use of these powerful beasts were Bulgaria, France, Hungary, Nazi Germany, Romania, and the Soviet Union. The roles that were laid away for this tank were engineering, infantry support, tank versus tank battles, and fighting at the front lines. And now some specific characteristics. This vehicle's length was 8.86 meters, with a width of 3.43 meters, a height of 3.1 meters and a total weight of 45.5 kilograms or 50 tons. The Maybach engine produced a 690 to 700 horsepower, which let the tank go as fast as 46 kilometers per hour. The maximum range was 177 kilometers. And after a successful test run, it is now time to shoot that powerful cannon. Let's go to the proving grounds. At the proving grounds you can shoot that cannon. It all starts at the table with the tablet. Using the tablet you can reset targets, but also select a couple of challenges, for which you earn a bit of money if you complete them. Of course, you can just put your tank at the firing position and have some fun with it. When you feel satisfied, you can bring back the tank to the workshop. As always, use the radio menu and choose to go back to the workshop. There's only one more thing I have to show you. How to bring the tank to your own museum, and start earning money by selling museum tickets. Again, by using the radio menu, you can move the tank to the museum. You just have to remember how your slots are filled in already. If you move the tank to a slot on which another tank is standing already, that other tank will appear in your workshop. If you move the tank to an open slot, no other tank will get swapped. This mechanism counts for moving your tank to whatever position within your company. I've already suggested the developers to give us a feature which tells us if a slot is already taken or not. Hopefully we will get something like that in the future. As you can see, I'm changing the information panels in the museum, which are standing around our Panther tank. You can take the original panels, which are included in the game, or you can go for add-ons from within the community. I make a lot of add-ons, or mods, whatever you want to call them. I'll put the link on which you can find mine, in the description down below. I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know what you think in the comments. If you liked what you saw, please consider to like the video and subscribe to the channel. More tank mechanic simulator videos like this one will come.
Let it go, make my body go, take our bodies high.